Story 1. It depends on wind, sun exposure, and humidity. 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius. But the sun is shining and the humidity is at 40% with little to no breeze. It is still warm enough to walk around with just a t-shirt and jeans. If the humidity drops to 10%, add 7 miles per hour winds, and block out the sun with thick clouds, I will put on a hoodie at least. Now reduce the temperature to 10 degrees Fahrenheit or lower at night, with no humidity and a constant wind. That is when I will put on my leather coat. Story 2. Anything below 40 degrees Fahrenheit is chilly. Depending on the wind, you may need a jacket for temperatures in the 30s. Story 3. I need to start wearing a coat at about -20 degrees Celsius. Can you guess which country I live in? There is a stereotype of us not wearing much in winter. Story 4. I would say anything in the teens Fahrenheit. However, after a week or so below zero, the teens feel warm. It is all perspective, I suppose. Honestly, I can tolerate just about any temperature as long as the wind is not blowing. I hate wind. I live in Montana, so I do love winter. Story 5. 0 degrees Celsius. Meh. A little chilly if there is a breeze. -10 degrees Celsius. A little cold, but easy to dress for. -20 degrees Celsius, pretty cold, but as long as there is no wind and you are dressed properly, it is not too bad. -30 degrees Celsius, very cold. At the edge of comfortable if you are dressed properly. Fingers and toes can freeze quickly. -40 degrees Celsius, dangerously cold. Exposed skin freezes in seconds, and even with full coverage, it can be difficult to stay warm. If you were in this temperature with no clothes, you would have extreme frostbite in minutes, lose your fingers and toes by 15 minutes, and be dead in under an hour. Story 6. It depends heavily on where you live and for how long. I used to live in a colder country where -15 degrees Celsius was considered chilly. Now, I live in a country where the temperature never goes below 12 degrees Celsius, and daytime highs can reach the high 30s. When I explain this to the locals, they cannot understand how it is possible to live in such cold. Story 7. 20s or teens Fahrenheit probably. Cold enough that exertion in moderate layers does not make me hot or sweat. Story 8. -15 degrees Celsius is when it gets really cold for me. I live right by the Baltic Sea, and when the wind blows, even -5 degrees Celsius feels way too cold. Story 9. Below 15 degrees Celsius, although 10 to 15 degrees Celsius is bearable in the sun. But below 10 degrees Celsius is really dreadful. Winter here is usually around -5 degrees Celsius to +5 degrees Celsius, and I hate it. Summers are around 20 to 30 degrees Celsius, and I love it. Story 10. 60 degrees Fahrenheit and below. I like to wear at least some sweatpants or jeans. If it is 50 degrees Fahrenheit and below, I wear a sweatshirt too. By the time it reaches 35 degrees Fahrenheit, I will possibly trade the sweatshirt for a winter jacket and put leggings on under my pants. But it all depends on how wet it is outside, because if it is 35 degrees Fahrenheit and dry, it is not too bad and I only need a sweatshirt. However, if it is slushy, then I am bundling up. Story 11. 69 degrees Fahrenheit and under is chilly. It is interesting to me how people are commenting in Celsius. I imagine just 1 degree apart could make a big difference. Story 12. It really depends. I have been in Los Angeles and thought the guy I was dating was being a complete wimp when the temperature was in the 40s Fahrenheit and he kept saying it was very cold. He was very big and muscular too. I have also been in Florida when it was freezing and the temperature was in the 40s Fahrenheit according to Google. I am confused. I do not know if it is as simple as the humidity, but temperature confuses me. Story 13. Anything near freezing. I have been known to wear flip-flops in the 40s sometimes because I am lazy with shoes. But I don't hate a comfortable chill. I live in the South, and the best feeling is that first slightly chilly morning in the fall when you can get up, turn on college football, and enjoy. Story 14. Depends on wind and season. 30 degrees Fahrenheit in the spring feels much warmer than 30 degrees Fahrenheit in the fall. Story 15. Below 30 degrees Fahrenheit with wind chill is very cold already. And when it is below 0 degrees Fahrenheit, I only want to work from home. Story 16. I consider it cold when machines and batteries, mostly engines, start to struggle, around -20 degrees Celsius or -4 degrees Fahrenheit. I am Canadian, so I know that most of the world thinks I am crazy when it comes to cold. Also, most people who feel cold at around 0 degrees Celsius just do not have the right gear. Story 17, 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Living in a true four-season climate my whole life, I have found the turning point is 50 degrees Fahrenheit. In the fall, 50 is when it starts to feel cold and when I start wearing jackets and hoodies. In the spring, 50 is when it feels warm and the shirt sleeves come out. Story 18. Don't think I've got that point yet. But I've only gone to about -5 degrees Celsius. Not sure what that is in Fahrenheit. Story 19. Depends on where I live at that moment. In Canada, around -10 to -20 degrees Celsius. In Vietnam, everything under 15 degrees Celsius is cold. I think what makes them different is the level of humidity. Story 20. Cold weather tires me out. I would say 40 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit, 5 to 10 degrees Celsius, is comfortable to work or be outside all day, like camping. Below freezing point, you probably need gloves, water freezes, and it is not enjoyable for more than a few hours. Story 21. Depends, do you mean in my normal clothing or my cold weather clothing? And are we counting our bodies adjusting to weather? Story 22. It is cold when I am willing to take the dexterity penalty from wearing gloves. This usually happens just above freezing, around 40 degrees Fahrenheit or 5 degrees Celsius. Story 23. There's only bad gear, but temperatures below 0 degrees Fahrenheit make me sigh before I get dressed to go outside and shovel. Story 24. Anything under 25 degrees Fahrenheit. I have been living too long in Western New York. I am walking around in jeans and a hooded sweatshirt at 25 degrees. Story 25. Are we talking about being naked, wearing a t-shirt and pants, or winter gear? Also, is the exposure for 2 minutes or less, or more than 30 minutes? I talked to my physical therapist 1 mile away about wearing a tank top while it was snowing in December. Jacket and gloves are necessary. I worked in freezers at -30 degrees Fahrenheit. I had to take breaks when moisture from my eyes caused my eyelashes to freeze, so I kept my eyes closed. Story 26. Sub 40 degrees Fahrenheit means I am wearing a down jacket. Anything above that, I am fine in a sweatshirt or a shell over a long sleeve shirt. Story 27. Sometimes in February, we get this 33-degree and rainy weather that just sucks all the warmth from your body. I would take 19 degrees and dry, sunny weather over that. Story 28. Where I live now, I feel cold when it gets close to freezing. When I lived in Ohio, that was short-sleeve weather. Story 29. I have a space heater on at my desk at work right now, and I am wearing a hoodie. I just checked the thermostat because I get chilly at 69 degrees. Story 30. Every autumn, the first night below freezing feels very cold. Every spring, the first day above freezing, everyone is outside in shorts and t-shirts soaking it up. It depends. Story 31. I can handle the cold. I wear a hoodie and shorts in the winter even if it is below 0. The only exception is when I am shoveling snow, then I put on some pants. It would not be so bad if it were not for the wind. Story 32. Below 30 degrees. At that point, I have to cover my ears and face to prevent them from freezing. For some reason, other people can do just fine uncovered. Story 33. When I was young, below 0 Fahrenheit. In my mid-20s, that jumped up to below 10 Fahrenheit. In my 30s, it was below 20. Now in my 40s, I prefer it to be over 50. But those first days into the 40s after a Montana winter sure do feel good. I will still be wearing my coat, but they feel good. Story 34. Under 30 degrees Fahrenheit at the start of winter. Under 20 degrees Fahrenheit after the first month. Chicago and Midwest girl for most of my life. Story 35. As someone with postural orthostatic tachycardic syndrome, it pains me to say this, but I get chilly in 70 degrees Fahrenheit. I pretty much keep myself in sweatpants and a hoodie all the time. For those who don't know, postural orthostatic tachycardic syndrome is also referred to as a type of dysautonomia, which is a dysfunction of the autonomic nervous system. Basically, my circulation is poor and I pass out frequently. Story 36. Minus 50 degrees Celsius. Your eyes try to stick together when you blink. The thing is, it depends on what you are acclimatized to. Wind and humidity are factors. Also, how your metabolism is at the time affects your perception. The same temperature can feel comfortable one day and chilly the next. Story 37. Cold for what? Cold for brewing coffee? Anything below about 190 degrees Fahrenheit. Cold for cycling? Anything below freezing. Cold for dancing in the rain? Probably below about 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Cold for typing? Anything below about 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Cold for hot working steel? Anything below 600 or 700 degrees Fahrenheit. Coldplay? Astronomer Chief Executive Officer body temperature at time of discovery. Story 38. As a Minnesotan, it is honestly hard to define. The weather can vary significantly throughout the year, depending on the season. In summer, you sometimes get a random day or two where the high is in the low 60s or upper 50s, approximately 15 degrees Celsius, and that feels quite cold compared to the norm. In winter, if someone says it is cold outside, that usually means below 10 degrees Fahrenheit, but more likely below 0 degrees Fahrenheit, roughly minus 15 degrees Celsius. Story 39. I live in the Dakotas. Usually, anything below 10 degrees Fahrenheit is cold. But there are always college guys running around in shorts anyway. It's crazy. I get a kick out of these people who think 40 or 50 degrees is cold. But yes, I know they are not used to that kind of climate, so I can't really blame them. I just find it comical. Story 40. It depends. Inside and outside air feel very different. What is the humidity? What is the wind doing? Where is the sun? It is all relative. I can feel warmer outside at 60 degrees than inside at 68 degrees. Story 41. If I am not moving around and doing anything, the temperature is about 74 degrees. If I am up and doing housework, it is about 72 degrees. However, the humidity very seldom drops below 60% here. Story 42. It depends on humidity, wind, and if the sun is out. 55 degrees Fahrenheit can feel cold if it is dry, dark, and windy. Low 40s degrees Fahrenheit is generally always hoodie weather. But it still depends. If it is sunny and dry, you could easily wear a short sleeve shirt, especially if you are doing physical activities. For swimming, water temperatures under about 77 degrees Fahrenheit are a bit chilly to swim in for me. Story 43. 15 degrees and below is too cold, and I will complain. This explains why I moved to a hot tropical location. Story 44. I live in Nevada, so it never gets that cold. I much prefer freezing cold to the blistering hot weather we have here, which is 117 degrees Fahrenheit. Story 45. I had a standard that when the temperature hit 40 degrees Fahrenheit outside, it was time for insulated coveralls. I was an industrial technician working mainly at steel mills by the Mississippi River. I lived in cheap Walmart hoodies, otherwise warm enough and cheap enough. If it got trashed, who cares? Story 46. Depends on what I am doing. If I am just sitting outside, 40 degrees Fahrenheit is kind of cold. But I would be comfortable in shorts and a t-shirt if it is sunny with no wind. If I am exercising, 25 degrees Fahrenheit is cold enough to wear long pants and a sweatshirt. Story 47. Anything below 50 degrees Fahrenheit. I was born, raised, and live in Arizona. It is very hot, and the highs in the winter are in the 50s. Story 48. As a Floridian, once the temperature drops below 70 degrees Fahrenheit, I break out the hoodies and hot chocolate. The 2 weeks of winter have begun. Story 49. Context is important for me. On one hand, I worked in northern Alberta in the winter. A minus 20 degrees Celsius day was warm compared to a minus 40 day. For you Americans, minus 40 is about where Celsius and Fahrenheit line up. In an average winter in southern British Columbia, I don't consider it cold unless water freezes. My teeth may chatter and I may shiver because it is chilly with high humidity, but it is not cold unless you can freeze ice cubes on the hood of your car. Story 50. In my office, 69 degrees Fahrenheit. Outside in the fall, 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Outside in the winter, negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Outside in the spring, 25 degrees Fahrenheit. Story 51. About 7 degrees Celsius or lower. I am always too hot. I overheat easily due to chronic illness, so anything higher than 10 degrees is no fun for me. Story 52. I am overweight, so I get hot and sweat even at most cold temperatures. Below 10 degrees Celsius would be comfortably cold for me. Winter is my favorite season. I do not like the summer. Story 53. Considering all the sunlight, humidity, and wind of the Duars-Turay region, something below 15 degrees Celsius is cold. When it hits 5 to 6 degrees regularly at night, I do not feel much difference in what to wear. So, yes, 15 degrees Celsius is cold where I live. Story 54. I love the heat, so I consider anything below 18 degrees Celsius to be cold from a weather disappointment point of view. However, 5 degrees Celsius and below I consider cold. Unless I am in the mountains, then it does not really feel cold. I think that is the atmosphere rather than anything else. Story 55. Depends really. The first cold front in winter always feels extra cold. But eventually, temperatures in the 30s to 40s Fahrenheit feel comfortable. Story 56. After minus 18 degrees Celsius or 0 degrees Fahrenheit, you need to plan what to wear if you will be outdoors for longer periods. That is when it starts to get cold. Story 57. Here in the American Southeast, I honestly consider below 50 degrees Fahrenheit chilly. Our coldest winter days barely get into the 30s degrees Fahrenheit. The coldest temperature I have ever felt was about 8 degrees Fahrenheit, and it honestly felt no different than being below 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Story 58. As a cyclist, anything below 10 degrees Celsius is when I have to use my winter clothing. On the plus side, going from winter to summer clothing is such a relief. Story 59. Below 40 degrees Fahrenheit is too cold to be cool. Between 40 and 60 degrees is cool. Between 60 and 80 degrees is warm, and anything above 80 degrees is hot. Story 60. Minus 1 degree Celsius without wind is not really cold. Actually, I experienced this in Iceland. I was wearing a long-sleeve t-shirt and jeans. Maybe it's my fats. Story 61. I grew up in Southern California. I put on a hoodie in the mid-1960s. I do not do anything outside if it is under 50 degrees Fahrenheit. I think the coldest I have ever experienced was about 18 degrees Fahrenheit, and that was about 10 years ago. Story 62. Depends on the season and location. In the summer, 15 degrees Celsius is cold. In the winter where I live now, Stockholm, minus 8 degrees Celsius is cold. In the winter where I am from, northern Sweden, real cold starts at around minus 15 or minus 20 degrees Celsius. Story 63. Pretty much anything below minus 10 degrees Celsius. If it was considered too hot, the answer is anything in a British heat wave. Story 64. Actually, it's the reverse for me. It should be, what temperature is considered hot for you? For me, 60 degrees Fahrenheit is hot. Anything below that is perfect. Story 65. For me, whenever I need to wear 2 layers of clothes, I consider it cold. For example, if I am wearing a t-shirt and need to wear a jacket, then it is cold. This usually happens when the temperature is below 17 degrees Celsius. Story 66. I'm from Wisconsin, so it depends on the time of year. I acclimate quickly to cold months but less quickly to warmer months. I am sensitive to heat and humidity, but I can tolerate it much better now that my doctor prescribed Viaza for my hot flashes. That said, I prefer 0 degrees Fahrenheit, which is minus 17.7 degrees Celsius, over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 37.7 degrees Celsius, anytime. Cold weather does not really affect me much until about 45 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 7.2 degrees Celsius, early in the cold season. By January, it needs to be below freezing for me to put on a jacket to go outside. Story 67. Below 10 degrees Celsius. You especially feel it when you get close to 0, -5 and below, and you will feel like you have found yourself in Jotunheim. Story 68. Less than 15 degrees Celsius is when it starts to feel cold here. This morning it was about 7 degrees Celsius in my lounge room, so I had to turn the heater on to make it a bit more comfortable. For what it is worth, what feels hot or cold really depends on the climate in which a person lives. 25 degrees Celsius is a nice temperature for me. 30 degrees Celsius starts to feel a bit warm. 35 degrees Celsius is getting hot. And above 40 degrees Celsius is time to find somewhere cool to relax. This is only because I am getting older. As a child, you can add 5 degrees Celsius to those temperatures for the same effect. Story 69. For me, anything below around 10 degrees Celsius, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, starts feeling pretty cold. Like time to grab a jacket and maybe a cozy drink. How about you? What is your BRRR, that is chilly temperature? Story 70. Considering I am wearing shorts and a t-shirt, the temperature is probably between 12 and 14 degrees Celsius with standard air humidity and little to no wind. If I am heated up by exercise such as hiking, my tolerance can be much lower. Story 71. When does it start to be cold? 15 degrees Celsius. Lowest I can handle? Probably minus 10 degrees Celsius with the assistance of a thick jacket and layers. I can handle cold more than heat. I start breaking down at 30 degrees Celsius and above 36 degrees Celsius. I may as well be a dead man walking. Story 72. People here are either speaking American English or they live in the Arctic, where minus 20 degrees Celsius is an actual reachable temperature. 10 degrees Celsius is freezing for me, and that is about as cold as the weather gets. Story 73. Going by this freezing air conditioning unit I share with others, I would say 60 degrees. It is set to 70 now, and that is pushing it for my thin-blooded self. Story 74. I am Canadian. I wear a winter coat only when the temperature is minus 30 degrees Celsius or colder. The rest of the time at 0 degrees Celsius, minus 10 degrees Celsius, or minus 20 degrees Celsius, I just wear a hoodie. So, it is cold when the temperature is minus 30 degrees Celsius or colder. Story 75. At the end of winter, 50 degrees feels warm, but at the end of summer, 50 degrees feels chilly. It really depends on the season. Story 76. Depends on the season, whether I am indoors or outdoors, and whether I am wet or dry. For instance, if it is winter, 50 degrees Fahrenheit is warm, but during the summer, 60 degrees Fahrenheit is cold. Story 77. Below 50 degrees Fahrenheit, I could use a hoodie if I will be outside for longer than 15 minutes. Below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, I might want to wear some gloves. Single digits are definitely wear a real coat territory. However, it all depends on the wind chill. If there is a stiff breeze, those temperature limits shift upward significantly. The wind removes the heated layer of air surrounding your body very quickly. Story 78. Whatever the temperature, my ex's feet were cold when she decided to warm them by placing her freezing toes on my bare back while I was sleeping. There are many reasons why she is my ex, and this was one of them. Story 79. Minus 30 degrees Celsius. When I have to change out the regular winter coat for one that is heavy duty. I used to have to walk 3 miles to work at 4 a.m. to my old job. I would gear up in a heavy coat, ski pants, fleece jacket, and 2 to 5 layers underneath because in January and February it could get to minus 50 degrees Celsius with the wind chill. Story 80. Under 30 degrees Fahrenheit. I live in New England and love early spring and late fall. Even if it is under 30 degrees Fahrenheit, if the wind is not bad, it is more than tolerable. I have absolutely shoveled snow in 25 degrees. As long as the legs do not get wet, it is not too bad. I am working up a sweat shoveling anyway. Story 81. Depends on the season. I am in Maine, and right now, in July, if it was 50 degrees Fahrenheit, I would be cold. However, in January, if it is 30 degrees Fahrenheit, I am skiing in a t-shirt. Story 82. It really depends on the humidity. If it is dry, 5 degrees Celsius, but if it is damp, anything under about 21 degrees Celsius is too cold. Story 83. Depends on context. Considered cold. Shower water temperature, 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Pool water temperature, 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Indoor air temperature during summer, 62 degrees Fahrenheit. Indoor air temperature during winter, 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Outdoor air temperature during summer, 49 degrees Fahrenheit. Outdoor air temperature during winter, 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Story 84. I have Raynaud's and I also have very little body fat and am underweight, so for me, anything 10 degrees Celsius and below is too cold. It's just not comfortable. My hands turn purple, then white, and I get goosebumps everywhere. That said, I live between Canada, where it is minus 30 degrees Celsius in the winter, and London, United Kingdom, where it rarely gets below 0 degrees Celsius in winter. I own many layering pieces, such as long thermals and jumpers. Both countries have hot temperatures in summer, around 30 degrees Celsius, which I love. Story 85. Under 75 degrees. Typically, sometimes I need to cool down, but that is what my car air conditioning is set to. The house stays at 80 degrees, and I am a bit chilly now. So it just depends. Yes, I know I am a lizard. Story 86. Before I moved to Florida, I was totally fine in temperatures even below freezing. In my native England, it rarely gets below 0 degrees Celsius. Now, when it gets into the teens Celsius, I start to feel cold. It's all about perspective. Last month, during the British heat wave, I was visiting and commenting on how nice the cool breeze was, as everyone around me was slowly wilting in the heat. Story 87. In what context? Cooking, 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Indoors, 18 degrees Celsius. Outside, 10 degrees Celsius. T, 60 degrees Fahrenheit. In all the universe, 0 Kelvin. Story 88. I am cold all the time. If there is a fan blowing, I am cold. The air conditioner is on, I am cold. So it really depends on the person. Temperatures outside, I would probably have a hoodie on in the low 70s. Story 89. Like 20 degrees Celsius. That is when it starts to get cold. But even then, a layer or two and some minor movement will keep you fine. Story 90. Largely depends on the amount of humidity in the air. 60 degrees in California feels totally different than 60 degrees in Florida. Story 91. It varies during the year. In summer, usually 28 to 35 degrees Celsius outside. 24 degrees Celsius is a bit cold, and I will put on a shirt. In winter, usually 10 to 22 degrees Celsius outside. 18 to 20 degrees Celsius is the threshold for me to put on a shirt. Story 92. Florida is 95 degrees today, so when it gets as low as 70, I start feeling chilly. Much lower than that is downright cold. Story 93. I live in a town with no winter basically, so for us some winters are around 18 degrees Celsius at most. Maybe 15 degrees Celsius or 16 degrees Celsius if we are really lucky. So for us, when it drops below 20 degrees Celsius, we are like, ugh, it is so chilly. Meanwhile, you travel 4 hours by car to the north and some winters reach below 0 degrees Celsius at night. Story 94. Well, it depends on what I am doing, humidity, wind, and so on. Also, what my expectations are and my clothing. For example, if I go skiing in cloudy weather with some wind at 0 degrees Celsius, I will be dressed accordingly, and it is not that cold. It is, in fact, quite warm for skiing. If I wore shorts and had plenty of exposed skin, I would freeze my testicles off. If I were to sit in a boat or a canoe to fish or something in the same weather, it would be miserable. Everything would be wet, and the wind would be much more noticeable. My feet and hands would feel like icicles quickly. If it is wet, anything below 5 degrees Celsius is definitely cold. Story 95. Probably the teens or single digits. Into the 20s even. I'll walk around without a jacket or long sleeves on since I run hot. Also, if I'm only going a short distance without taking any pauses somewhere else. Story 96. When I lived in Massachusetts for a few years, I became accustomed to the winters there. 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit was not too bad for me. I would even go out and smoke in shorts at minus 10 degrees and not feel cold if there was no wind. Then I went to North Carolina for a month, and 25 degrees was brutally cold. Humidity made the difference. A temperature that may be comfortable for you in one place can feel shockingly cold in another. Story 97. There is comfortable cold and uncomfortable cold. Uncomfortable cold is 20 degrees Fahrenheit and below. Comfortable cold is mid-30s to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Story 98. Probably around 10 degrees Celsius. Maybe around 15 degrees Celsius if there is also wind and rain, although that is probably chilly and not truly cold. I guess below 10 degrees Celsius is cold. I might still wear shorts at 15 degrees Celsius. Story 99. 80% humidity, 10 degrees Celsius. I need more than a sweater, but 0% humidity minus 30 degrees Celsius. I will be in shorts and cutoffs. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.